Well, welcome to the third annual Technology.fm Fireside Chat. We are here again with the hosts of HomeTech.fm, with the host of the Smart Home Show and the Smart Kitchen Show. And I'm here too, and I'm the host of Home On. Let's introduce everybody. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Richard Gunther. I'm from the Digital Media Zone. I already said that I host Home On. I'm going to pass it to Seth.
Hi, I'm Seth Johnson. I am one of the co-hosts on the HomeTech.fm podcast. Joined, every week, usually, by Jason Griffin. Jason is on the line as well.
Yep. Hey there. And Seth is joined typically, unless, traveling or whatever. But Seth and I are partners on the Home Tech podcast. We're both former, coming from the integration side of the business, and we still work sort of in that professional side of the smart home and do a weekly show that you can find over at HomeTech.fm. And I'm super excited. I can hardly believe that this is our third time doing this. I've been looking forward to it for quite a while. It's always a really fun show, so really excited to be here.
This is Mike, the host of the Smart Home Show, as Richard said. I'm think going to go down a limb here and say I'm the least drunk of everyone on the show today, because you guys started drinking before me.
No.
Yep.
I'm on water.
Oh.
I'm on water today. So, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm the designated driver.
Yeah, that's how you landed in that seat, right, Richard?
Exactly. So in that capacity, let's talk about what's been going on and what we think is going on next year in the smart home space. We each, as you said, kind of come from different perspectives. And I love that once a year we get to bring our different perspectives together and share them. Mike, you're looking at things more from an industry perspective. Seth and Jason, a lot of times you're looking at both the convergence of DIY and the installer space, as well as the home tech installer perspective. And I'm typically looking at it from the DIY perspective. So I love that we all have kind of our different views on things. And I think that makes the conversation interesting. We start with our recap of last year's predictions. And let's see how well we did. I'm going to start with Mike. You had a couple different predictions. How would you say you fared?
I think I maybe got a B. My first, my apparently wild ass prediction, as put here in the notes, was robots. And what's interesting here is I think that we certainly saw, a huge investment more broadly in the tech space in robotics. I think the most action happening in robotics is probably on the industrial side. But we saw some fairly high profile entries into consumer robotics. One of the ones, what I think is interesting for this conversation, is Tim Enwall, the former CEO of Revolve, which got acquired by Google. We all know Revolve. We can all mourn the Revolve hub. We all miss that. The one with how many radios? 7 radios. Anyway, he is the CEO of Misty Robotics. So he made the transition into the robotic space, and they've said that they want to make a consumer robot, not unlike Rosie the robot, that eventually just walks around her home. And there are a couple. It seems like they're maybe a year or two out in terms of actually showing. They're probably going to do some fairly simple robots first, but that's just an example. I think there's some other ones that we could talk about as well. But did you guys see any action in the robotic space that interested you,
other than the terrifying Boston Robotics demonstrations?
We're all going to die. Yes.
Is it my Roomba stealing all of my personal information throughout my house? It's vacuuming it up.
That's
yes.
Right. That was the one that came to my mind. Yeah. Yeah. I didn't see a ton. I think it's a slow and steady march. I have to imagine it's going to happen and it's just a matter of time. But I didn't see a ton of movement on my end other than creepy demos at CES and vacuums that are stealing my data.
So you're giving me maybe a C+ on that one, I think. That sounds like
yeah, like a C, right down the middle.
My second prediction was the smart home will be built into the fabric of the home. I think it did okay on this. I mean, I think we saw some interesting stuff from IKEA. I think, Amazon was awarded a patent for Alexa controlled lighting So I think that people are definitely thinking about this idea of let's build more and more intelligence into the fabric of the home. We certainly saw some interesting demos from the likes of like Panasonic, where they had the kitchen table coming alive with interesting displays. So I think this is one that's happening. It's kind of a quiet revolution, but I definitely think you're going to see more and more of this happening over time. Do you guys see? I mean, Jason, how would I grade out on this one?
Yeah, I think it's another one of those slow and steady. It's tough, right? You're making predictions about the next year, and a lot of times that these things are going to take multiple years and iterations to get there. But, I think you're right. It calls to mind an article Seth and I were talking about on our show recently about, smart speakers and how they're sort of filling this weird void in the home. And the gist of that article was things are moving towards wearables. But I actually believe that a lot of this functionality is just going to become ubiquitous, right? And I agree with you. Appliances, furniture, TVs, entertainment devices. I think this sort of intelligence is just going to be all around us, and it's really going to be all about the platform battle that we spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about in the smart home. But slow and steady. I'd give you I'm sorry, Mike, I got to give you another C.
Ooh, Seth gave me an A+.
Yeah, I'd give you an A+
in the comment section.
Yeah. So yeah,
A+.
Yeah.
I don't know how
wow,
that's an A+.
He's the drunk teacher, though.
Yeah. I don't know that I would count that. I'd give you a B. Let's even it out. Let's average it at a B.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, we're going on the bell curve here. I was going to say builders really kind of jumped on board this year. I think Jason's going to talk about that a little bit later, but we definitely saw a bunch of movement on the builder side of getting smart home technologies built into the house as it was being sold. I'm thinking of like the Lennar deal and things like that, where they were installing packages with Nest thermostats, or I can't exactly remember the exact deals, but there was definitely smart home technologies going in, like thermostats, doorbells, lighting control, and that kind of thing. So I'm gonna give you a higher grade than the other guys are giving you a hard time here.
All right.
Well, thanks. I think my last prediction is kind of along the same lines, in that we see smart home technology built into appliances. And I think we definitely saw a lot of progress. I think CES 2018, next month, we're going to see a massive amount of announcements. But you definitely saw like Whirlpool and Samsung integrating more and more smart technology into their appliances. Electrolux as well. So I think that one is definitely one. You saw the big appliance guys really waking up to this idea of connected home and smart home.
I'm big into this. I would give you probably a B on this, because I think the appliance as a service thing, I've talked about that too. I think that has a lot of potential. I don't think we're there yet. I definitely want to see that. So, I'd give you a strong B.
I think that's a separate thing. I don't remember if those are two different predictions. Like the appliance as a service is a business model concept, whereas I think smart home integration with appliances is like a technology evolution, which is definitely happening.
How many predictions did you make, Mike?
I don't know.
If he makes enough, one of them will be right.
Yeah.
All right.
Richard, you're up, I think.
Yeah, I'll go next. So I'll try and make this fast. I first predicted that we would start to see some app consolidation, that people are getting app fatigue and will ultimately gravitate toward more consolidated control. And I think we've seen this most with the Amazon, Apple, and Google assistants that are available for people to use to control their homes. Another thing also related to that Siri and HomeKit control is that Sylvania, in their rollout of HomeKit compatible devices, made the decided move not to put out a control app. They have an app, and the only thing it is for downloading firmware updates for your devices. They made the decision that there are already plenty of apps out there. We're not adding to the mess. So I don't know. Did other people see this similar type of pattern or behavior?
I think that when I heard you first say fewer apps, I was thinking more in the traditional sense of fewer apps on my my iDevice or my Android phone or whatever. I didn't really even think about installing, saying the voice assistants would be the fewer apps. But I think if you look at it from that angle, like the voice assistant being the home control app, I definitely think that you nailed that one. I'm not sure. I have to go back and listen to what we said there, but I think I wasn't really expecting the voice assistants to really take off as much as they did this year.
Okay, well, I cheated and I did go back and listen,
Yeah.
and I did mention that.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, no, I think you're right. I think app fatigue is a big thing. We talk about it frequently, and if that's the overarching thing, Richard, I'm going to have to take your word for it. I didn't go back and listen myself, but I definitely would give you high marks on that one.
All right, well, I'll take them. So my next one was my wild ass prediction, and I've already been on your show to eat a little crow on this one. I was so wrong. I so wanted to see Siri in Sonos. And instead, quite surprisingly, we ended up with Amazon's Assistant in Sonos. I knew that we were going to get the Amazon Assistant ability to control Sonos, but I didn't actually see it going into Sonos speakers. So that's pretty exciting. I think that's cool, but it is certainly not what I predicted at all. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. So I think that's a fail. There's just no way to say that other than fail. We don't have to vote on that. And then finally, I predicted that we would see AirPlay on Sonos. And I do remember that our friend Seth was really excited about this. I think he almost shed a little tear.
Very close.
He was so excited about this idea. We're not there yet. It's coming. We know it's coming, but it's not out yet. So I'd say I'd give myself maybe a C+, B- there.
You guys are so hard on yourself. I'm going to give you an A, Richard. I mean, come on. I'm the good professor here.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Seth's totally the PE teacher.
Participation grade. You showed up.
He just wants us to vote in kind when he goes next.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Because he's got a tough one, doesn't he?
Oh, all right. So, yeah, I mean, come on, guys. You got to give me this one, right? Siri in a can is real. I made a bold prediction that Siri would be put into some kind of smart home assistant device. Don't know if it was too bold, but I mean, Apple had to jump in the game sometime, and they finally did. At WWDC, we saw that they introduced a smart speaker / digital assistant that for $349 that would come out later this year. And a couple of weeks ago, we learned that wasn't going to happen because the device was delayed for whatever reason. Probably, I mean, Richard and you and I probably would agree on this. It's probably software, right? It's not the hardware, which I think they were demoing fairly well, but software is hard. So
I would agree.
Yeah. So it's going to be probably next year around the iPad launch is usually what you see mid-March. The press release said first half of next year. So it could be as late as summer before we see Siri in a can again.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to give you too hard of marks on this one, Seth. I mean, it's been a long time coming, and it, by all accounts, it really looked like it was going to happen this year, right up until I think literally just a week or two ago, as we sit here and record this, is when the story broke that Apple was going to miss that holiday shipping goal that I'm sure they had, and so it's disappointing, but at least you got to go back and rewind a year, right? Like when you and I were, and all of us were talking about this Siri in a can, it wasn't even a thing yet. We all suspected strongly that it would get there, but at least we've got a product now, and we're just waiting for them to ship.
Yep, I'd give you a B on that. Solid B.
My two other offhand comments during that conversation were that there's no real clear vision for Echo, which I am ready to stand by and defend at this point. I'm really sick and tired of the, and I'm going to coin a term, half Amazon products at this point. It's just because I'm not going to say the other word. I guess we can say it now because we said wild ass prediction. So I'm going to say Amazon products are half-assed. I'm done with this garbage, and I'm ready for them to actually release a product that is fully thought out and ready to go, rather than just halfway done. So I was nice last year. This year I'm going to be less nice on Amazon. And maybe we'll talk about that in predictions, but I kind of had some kind of poked around on my words last year, kind of trying to stumble over what my thoughts were on it. But I really haven't seen any movement on Echo other than kind of what you would expect for it to be, the product of the smart home and the digital assistant that I would want to use in my smart home. It's actually been quite frustrating to use. And then I said Google and Apple will surpass Amazon, simply kind of going on that Siri in a can thing. Google, I think, is coming closer than Apple at this point with the Google Home updates they did this year. Very, very impressive what they were showing off, especially with the little Google Mini, which you can pick up now. I think it's around the same price as the Amazon Echo. And
same price as the Dot.
Yeah, so what, $25, $30 for that. And then the giant Max thing that they introduced, right? So that was going to compete with the Apple HomePod, which wasn't released. And the Sonos Play 5, I think it's kind of in the same price point, but actually has some brains to it. So I'm more bullish on Google these days, I guess, even though they just want to steal your data, but than Apple, I suppose. But Google seems like they have at least a vision of what they want to do with the smart home. Amazon, I'm not so convinced on it. I mean, that app for the Amazon Prime Video on the Apple TV is just horrible. I'm so upset by that. This is a giant company.
Oddly enough, for a company that built their company on an online website store, they consistently produce terrible software.
Agreed.
I just don't get it.
Yep. Well, hey, this this dovetails, I think, nicely into mine. I'll jump in there because I really had one prediction there in AI coming to the smart home, right? And I think, in hindsight, way too broad and sweeping of a prediction. I think that we're starting to see hints of that, but I think I agree with what I think is the overriding sentiment of what Seth was saying, which is, voice control in the home still very much feels like a toy, like a novelty, a sort of entertainment. Most people, I think, are using it. I know I use it in my home for mostly very rudimentary tasks like turning on music or checking the weather or things of that nature. And so I think AI in the smart home really still has a long ways to go. I do think we're starting to see the first signs of it with companies getting increasingly invested and making it clear that they're very committed to developing smart home or a voice control technology for the home. Google, I think, is to me clearly the forerunner when it comes to what they're going to be able to do, just by virtue of the amount of data they have and the ability to process all of that. And I think that's really going to be the key ingredient to truly getting AI in the home. But I think 2017, I definitely give myself a very mid grade on this at best in terms of AI coming to the smart home. But I do think that we are continuing to see signs that we're on the right path.
And to give you credit, you did make mention that there would be excitement over the voice control space, and I think that's taken off. That's blown up this year.
Well, how has it if Amazon's product is such crap, Seth?
Fair question.
It's really, really easy to sell $20 and $30 trinkets.
It actually starts at $50, except with all the crazy holiday sales. But yeah, I get your point. I honestly think y'all are underselling the wide interest and kind of surprise and delight that the Echo devices bring into many homes.
Oh, I agree.
I don't think your kids are of the right age to necessarily appreciate it, and for you to appreciate how they can interact with the home using a device like that. And B, you say you only use this for like gimmicky things. I know so many people, including myself, who barely turn to their control apps anymore because they just ask the Echo to do it for them for their general smart home scene setting and stuff like that. So I kind of don't get your frustration there.
No, I wouldn't say I'm bullish, or I'm sorry, I wouldn't say that I'm bearish on Echo. In fact, my 3-year-old is absolutely enamored by it, and I think it's fascinating to watch. I think that the distinction that I think maybe you're missing, Richard, that I was trying to draw was more of this, voice control being different than like true AI, like the conscious home and this sort of predictive behavior of smart home devices and systems to be able to sort of understand and predict what we want and need versus just firing off a voice command. And I think to Seth's point, in the Echo world, at least, a very structured and rigid voice command that has to be said exactly right or it doesn't work.
Yep.
Not a lot of natural language processing, not a lot of ability to string multiple commands together. Josh AI has that. Google Home recently announced that. But these are the things I'm talking about, where just taking that voice control to the next step of being able to interact with it a little more naturally.
Totally agree.
I think Richard's right in that, most of us aren't as discerning as you guys. I think you guys kind of have that, integrator kind of look at things. You're a little more discerning. You're more on the programmer side oftentimes. The fact of the matter is, like, Amazon is just seeding the market with tens of millions of these things, and they can improve the software over time. I mean, what they do have in these Echo devices is great long-range listening capability. So the hardware is actually really solid. I think the software can improve, right? So that's the whole idea of like a connected device. So
I agree on that point too. I'm just waiting for that to happen. So far, Amazon has not proved that they are able to do that in any way, shape, or form.
Fair point. All right. Well, we should move on. And we have 3 questions that we're going to ask round the table. And the first is, what was your favorite or most surprising home tech story in 2017? So
I cheated and have like 3 of
them.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't have time
Mike
to
likes
go
to do
through
that.
3 because we're already running a little long. So let's go with your absolute favorite and maybe a nod to something else. And I'm going to start with Seth this time.
Okay. So, my most surprising announcement, I guess, was the Siri in a can. The emotional roller coaster is what I put here in the notes of being so excited about a product and then so extremely let down that it's just not going to appear this year. So I am excited that the HomePod is going to be released. And actually, I'm even more encouraged that Apple put the brakes on it, right? And they didn't ship a product that simply competes with an Amazon Echo or simply competes with a Google Home. Maybe we know so little about the HomePod other than it sounds great and it has Siri in it. Great. What else does it do for that price point?
And a screen for some reason.
Well, and is there a screen? Like that debate went on like forever, right? We don't even know what this product is at its core and what it will do. I think we do know that I think one of the Apple execs came on a while back and said went public and said that it's going to be more of a HomeKit hub than I think we were maybe saying that it was going to give credit for, but that's extremely encouraging because HomeKit is local control. And if they can really nail that down, it's going to be one of the fastest working systems on the market right now. We don't have to go out and have the latency of a few 100 milliseconds adding up with every API call to a server. It'll just work right off that device. So that's encouraging. But I guess one of my most surprising, not seen coming at all stories I think this year was the Ring security system that was introduced and then hit off the market by ADT. The pricing on that was disruptive, completely disruptive. And the fact that it's not on the market now for the holiday season, I mean, that's got to kill the guys over at Ring. But I was shocked. I mean, we've been talking about disruption in this home control space for so long. Home security has been just one of those markets that's just been out there. Nobody's touched it. Everybody's come in at the $35, $45, $55 mark for a monthly monitoring. And Ring comes in, $10 a month or something like that? Something crazy.
Yep. $10. And it's $10 if you're already paying that $10 because you already have cameras. It doesn't cost you any more. It's basically free on top of what you're already paying. Crazy disruption. And I'm sure ADT is throwing everything they can at this to make it go away. We'll see how well that lawsuit goes, this following year. But it will be this story with Ring was just,
I did not see that coming. I expected if Ring came out with anything that they would charge another $10 a month for it, but not or $30 a month like everybody else, and not leave any money on the table. Holy cow! For $10 a month to get monitored security, that's surely going to disrupt every corner of the market.
Yep, agree. And I really, really hope it does. I'm going to jump in right after you here because you and I were kind of thinking along the same lines, but in very different ways. My most interesting and surprising story was the HomePod and it coming in at basically $350. That, to me, is just baffling. And I'm an Apple fanboy, and I have no interest whatsoever in buying one of these things at $350. Now, I already have Sonos, so I don't have a need. This would be an additional thing in my home. Maybe if I didn't have Sonos, I would think differently, but I have a hard time swallowing that. I really do. I just don't think it makes any sense whatsoever. I understand what they're doing. They're trying to come out with a true audio product, and it happens to have their assistant in it, as opposed to an assistant thrown into $10 worth of hardware. I get it. But yeah, I still just...
I agree.
I don't know how it's going to sell.
They've got to justify that somehow. I mean, they really do.
I feel like Apple's the new Microsoft. Like, it feels like they're just clumsily moving their way through the smart home, like Microsoft's been doing for the past decade. They just don't understand the market dynamics. I mean, they're trying to sell a high-end speaker. Amazon and Google are trying to take over our homes. And I don't
right.
You know what I mean? And that's a much bigger strategic play. And Apple is just kind of just slowly bumbling their way through this. And I feel like they're just falling further and further behind.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think maybe they're relying a little bit too heavily there on their brand cachet. They've always been a premium product, but yeah, your point is interesting, Mike. I hadn't thought of it in those exact terms, but you see Amazon and Google coming out with $30 smart speakers that people are just buying up like crazy, and it's a land grab, right? And I think you're right. Apple is falling behind big time.
They're thinking about services and commerce and being the home interface, and Apple's like, let's sell a really expensive speaker. I feel like it's like 2010 called and wants their strategy back.
Yeah,
it's true. Although my my portfolio isn't complaining right now.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
Yeah, and I'd agree with those points on all those points. Like, it's expensive and they're going to have to justify it, but we got one bullet point. Hey, it sounds good, but I don't think we got the other bullet points on the product. And they're going to have to, if they don't come up with anything else, it's not going to sell. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, agreed. Jason, why don't you go next?
Yeah, definitely. I went with the most surprising story here, and it was streaming video / the traditional pay TV model just hemorrhaging subscribers. This has been a slow and steady thing, like a lot of these stories that we're talking about, and streaming video certainly was not a new technology by any stretch of the mind in 2017, but it, to me, emerged as a very clear top sort of trend or story of the year very early on, and that just continued throughout the year. You had YouTube TV launched, DirecTV Now, Hulu got into the live TV space. I'm sure I'm missing like half a dozen other like smaller streaming services that probably launched. Netflix is on an absolute tear right now. Their stock hit an all-time high recently, and they're adding subscribers like by the millions every quarter. I just think it's fascinating to watch. You've got the Comcasts and the Verizons of the world are trying to come out with like their own answer to these streaming services, and I think doing that with very mixed results. And some of them are really just trying to take linear TV and stream it, and that's just not enough. Like a lot of the original content that these companies like Amazon and Netflix are coming out with is super compelling. You see people on social media talking about it all the time. So it's really become a new thing and a new normal for people to really embrace these services. And I thought, to me, it was a very surprising story. And then just, in the background, you had story after story after story of just subscriber hemorrhaging by these large cable TV providers, these traditional pay TV providers. So, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in some of these boardroom conversations that are taking place at some of these bigger companies because to me there's a very prominent shift happening right now in people's content viewing and consumption habits that I think will continue to play out over the next year, and I'll be fascinated to watch.
I also think it's interesting that we're seeing that most of the services that are doing really well here are either offering a fairly equitable alternative to live television service or new content of their own, original content.
Yep.
And that the day of yet another streaming movie and video service that just offers the same stuff, yet another digital movie store, is over. We saw a lot of places shutter this past year, actually, that just couldn't keep it going. Studios that were trying to have their own online digital stores have basically shut them down. MGO went away. It's basically part of Fandango now. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that we're seeing consolidate and change, as well as there was a land grab in this space, I think. And now I think we have established players.
Yep. And, I think there's still a long ways to go. I think, there's some very clear hurdles in terms of content aggregation and sort of consolidating things to where it's not so overwhelming as an average consumer to figure out, okay, well, if I watch, these 10 channels or these 15 things are the things that I love to watch, and then going out and trying to like correlate that to which services you're going to buy or which streaming service you're going to, standardize on is still very difficult. I think that's still a barrier for a lot of people. But I think we're getting there. And I think 2018 will be a really interesting year to watch.
Maybe we'll finally get that wooden box that pulls all your services together. I totally want that.
It's made of wood, Richard.
Like my VCR in 1980.
All right, Mike, what are you thinking here?
I have two things I want to talk about. First, I will tell you about my favorite product of the year, and I think Seth is going to word fight with me, maybe because he's so anti-Amazon. But I tell you that the thing that's changed the most behavior in our home is the Echo Show. Like, I love that product. I think Amazon is, again, skating where the puck's going to be, because they realize that video combined with audio or with voice control is and kind of a voice assistant is really powerful. And I just walk into the kitchen now, and the first thing I look at all the time is the Echo Show. Like it has a running ticker. It's kind of like the cron is like always going, has an interesting story. And like 3 times a day, I'm asking Amazon or Alexa, tell me about the story about gummy bears, whatever crazy thing. So I think there's actually a white space opportunity in the kitchen around just screens. Like that's why Samsung has put a lot of investment into the Samsung Family Hub. And I think, and you heard a lot of rumors over the past couple of years about the Amazon kitchen computer. And I think this was the kitchen computer for them. I don't know if this originally was, but when they had the success of the Echo, they made this their kitchen computer. And I think this is like a powerful product for them.
I'm not gonna disagree. I mean, like on that, the things that you said, like that's what I actually like to use my Echo for. I would just, as they try and push into the smart home, and the home services, I'd like to see them do better. And that's, they are clearly the market leader as far as sales or devices are out there right now. Like I'd really like to see them do more with what they have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard very mixed reviews, and admittedly, I'll come right out and say it. I think part of this comes from the having the integrator background, and we have a sort of a private community of home tech listeners that we engage with a lot, and a lot of them, I won't say a lot, a small handful of them have not had good things to say about the Echo Show, but I agree, and actually I'm fascinated to hear that you're a big fan of it, because I do think that idea of adding video to that sort of interface is really potentially compelling, at least. And even if there are certain things about the execution or the design of it, I've heard some people complain about, just looks a little bit clunky and doesn't really have a nice aesthetic like you would expect. But I think overall, on paper, I look at the functionality of a device like that and it makes total sense.
Yeah, it's got a big butt.
Exactly.
I mean, I put it in the corner where you can't see it from either side. It's like, it looks, all I can really see the screen. But I'll tell you what, like many of us, our significant others oftentimes could care less about technology. My wife is certainly like that. And she has pretty much hated almost everything I bring in the home, including the Echoes. She loves the Echo Show. And my kids love it. So like, that's anecdotal, but like just their reaction to that device is much different than every other voice assistant. The second thing I think is interesting, or the second product that I was actually most intrigued and excited for in a way, was Andy Rubin's smart home product. They announced, the central phone got all the attention because they actually came out with this year. But like you guys were smart owners, I was really intrigued by the central home. Because Andy Rubin is a pretty iconic guy. He was the guy behind Android. And I just thought, well, this guy's a pretty big thinker. Maybe he's going to do something really interesting. So it's still kind of in a holding pattern. So we haven't really moved much beyond the announcement, but I'm really intrigued to see where that goes next year.
It sounds too good to be true. It sounds like a unicorn product.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time believing that we're really going to see it in the form that he talked about. I also think that its roadmap is probably a bit in jeopardy with him stepping back from the company for a while.
He's back.
Is he?
He came back.
He's back,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 weeks. That was enough.
Well, that didn't last long. I guess he got his life back in check. I don't know.
He looked in the mirror and went back to work.
We can't talk about net neutrality, but we're getting close to talking about something else. So, yeah, no, I look at the team that, one of the first things I did, and I learned this from you, Mike. I looked at the team that's backing that up. And I'm not sure that there's anyone. I mean, it looked like there were 3 people working on it. And that's a very ambitious project to have just a handful of people working on. You need teams of hundreds to do what they were talking about.
Yeah.
So I think I agree. I think it sounds like a unicorn project that unfortunately we may never see. But it's the kind of project that I would love to see. Honestly, I would love to see something like that happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. All right. Well, I'm going to kick us off on the next question. The next question is, what was 2017's most important overall story or theme in the smart home from our respective perspectives? And from my perspective, and this kind of happened, I think, gradually through the year, and then bam, at the end of the year, hit big. And that is basically the advent of the DIY home security system, or DIY friendly home security systems that even some kind of dealers and package services are starting to offer. So on the DIY side, we have the Nest offering that just came out in November. We have Wink now offering something of their own. We even have Amazon actually working with by putting out cameras and things like that, trying to compete with the Nest Cam. And we're also seeing partnerships between companies like ADT and Samsung, so that now we're seeing ADT products and Samsung products packaged together in Best Buy stores for security purposes. And then the other thing that I think, and this kind of follows up on one of the things that you mentioned last year, Mike, is that companies like Vivint and ADT are doing fairly well in installing some of these newer smart home systems that basically take the old world of doing things and throw it away and mix up the core foundation of their security system with modern products that people can buy in stores. You're no longer just buying ugly white boxes. You can have a Nest thermostat, or you can have your Amazon Echo as a part of this system that they're still monitoring and they're still servicing for you. I think this is a huge shift in how people look at home security.
I think this has been happening. This has been something that has been in process for the past 3 or 4 years, and it just exploded. I mean,
yep.
let's give credit to Simply Safe, right? I mean, it's a clunky old product. They're upgrading it. They came out with their net cam this year. But they were kind of like the first guys to say, hey, we can break this model that ADT's created. ADT started reevaluating the home security model like 3 or 4 years ago. They came out with their own kind of product they came out with an API that allowed companies to connect to it. And the LG security camera that never really came out because it got held up in lawsuits was built around that. I've been using a Canary in my home for like, I think 2 or 3 years now. And that was really kind of like a DIY home security product. So a lot of these things, it started around these connected cameras. Some of these guys started to add like cheap home security monitoring services about a year or two ago. And then it just really took off this year. So we've seen an explosion, and the big guys like Nest have gotten in. I'm excited about Nest. I'm excited about Wink getting in because I think those guys are great. And to your point, Vivint is just continuing to kill it because they're the white glove service of kind of the home security and smart home space. And there's a market for a white glove service. There
is. The only thing that I found frustrating there is that if you're a tinkerer, or if you're someone that really wants to get involved in what's going on in your home, there really isn't any room for that with their system. They have a fairly prescribed ecosystem.
Yeah. That's not their target market though, right?
Right. And I know we've talked about that. Yeah.
There's no Raspberry Pi add-on that you can get for ADT.
Yeah.
Correct. All right. Why don't we skip to Jason?
Sure. Yeah. To me, the most important overall story that probably didn't grab a ton of headlines and maybe flew a little bit under the radar, but I think massively significant is the builder adoption of the smart home. So builders like Brookfield, Lennar, KB Homes, some other big production builders mainly coming out with big national headlines about really adopting the smart home. So those first three I rattle off again, Brookfield, Lennar, KB Homes, like they all came out at separate times during the year and said, hey, we're going to actually start marketing HomeKit ready homes. As somebody who really knows the smart home, anybody probably listening to this show read that and said, well, what does that really mean? Right? Like, there's a few different ways you could interpret that. But I think the bigger story is that builders are seeing a business case for the smart home. I know as a former integrator who worked in the installation side of the business for a very, very long time, that builders haven't really seen an interest in a business case for the smart home. Maybe security, that's about the closest that it's gotten. But now you've got, these builders. Lennar had Ruckus Wi-Fi certified homes that they're now doing. Toll Brothers came out with their TBI Smart Home Solutions subsidiary, which I think used to incidentally be like a security company. I can't remember what it was called, but anyways, they're broadening that focus out and taking a look at the smart home. And I think it's just the beginning. And to me, a very significant story because again, builders aren't doing it because they're technology geeks or because they just think it's cool. They're sitting down and figuring out like, what is the business case and does this actually add value to our product? And the fact that a fairly significant number of the biggest ones out there are starting to see that business case, to me is a very big story.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, it's something Jason, you and I have fought for so many years. Like, can we put wire in the house maybe? And being told no.
Right. Like just a couple.
No, the answer is no. Isn't everything wireless? And
get off of my job site.
Yeah. It's now become, I won't say mainstream, but it's definitely become a mainstream upgrade, right? Like, you want granite countertops? You want a smart home? It's a checkbox. And I think that's encouraging, especially from the builder side.
Yeah, I just think it represents a bit of a turning point. And I think it's just the beginning. I don't think that this is a, you flip the switch and it just happens type of deal. But the fact that they're starting to adopt this technology and to me, it just means that more people are asking for it. They're seeing more demand for it, and they're responding to that. And I think that underlying element of the story is the one that is the most significant to me.
All right, very cool. Mike.
Yeah, I don't want to beat the Amazon drum over and over because we all talk about it much. But here's an angle I think is like a big part of the story in 2017 around Amazon's continued I don't want to say dominance, but maybe dominance. And it's not, we all know what's happened with Echo, but they've actually started to roll up a lot of the talent, right? So if you look at, because I'm kind of a smart home nerd and I follow like a lot of the executives, I was kind of surprised. I was on a panel with Nathan Smith, the CEO of Wink, in March. A few months later, I look at his LinkedIn. He's working for Amazon. You guys probably, I don't know if you remember Chris Bowering. He was kind of a lot of the guy that interfaced with industry on Lowe's Iris. Oh, lo and behold, he's now the guy running product for Amazon Key. The CEO of Sancerre, one of the kind of about a year ago, one of the big sous vide companies, connected sous vide circulators. She's now working on over on Amazon on the grocery side, but it's not really smart on. But so it's not only just this idea of like they're just doing well and pushing product into consumer homes. They're actually just hiring away a lot of talent, and that kind of speaks to the other overall trend that I've just started to see is we're just starting to see consolidation, I think, in the smart home space. Obviously, what we saw with the acquisition of Zonoff by the guys at Ring, that's interesting.
To the extent that was an acquisition.
Yeah.
Parking lot deal.
Yeah, it was kind of an acqui-hire. They bought the assets. But the big, I think probably the biggest acquisition was the August acquisition by Assa Abloy. Probably the highest profile smart lock company outside of, like the Unikeys of the world. It actually probably is the highest profile smart lock company, and they were acquired by Assa Abloy. They didn't really talk about price, which told me that it was probably not the best valuation. But I think we're just kind of starting to see a market where people are starting to get acquired, and you're starting to see aggregation of talent and products around a few big platforms.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that in this consolidation space, I worry, and I know we've had this conversation before, I worry that as we see companies consolidate, that potential early adopters could get left in the cold if the companies that end up kind of taking them over or bringing the technology in decide that they don't want to continue the life of the original product that startup or that early company had. Zonoff is a great example of that, right? I mean, we have at least dozens of Staples Connect hubs out there that who knows what's going to happen to them because there's just no maintained server infrastructure behind them. There are still servers there, but who knows how long they're going to still run. And I think we're going to see that with other companies as we continue to see this sort of aggregation and consolidation.
Isn't that a weird thing? Like Zonoff has no employees and it's still an entity that is like, it's so weird, like such a strange place for a company to be in.
All right. Well, I think Seth, you're last to answer this question.
Yeah, I think I can kind of bounce off what Mike was saying and just say, the platforms to me look like they were stabilizing the home control platforms. We've got some pretty decent offerings. I mean, if you wanted to go out and purchase a home automation system, even like you could do it from DIY or you could do it through the professional market. You have some really, really decent offerings these days. There's a handful of them on the pro side, Control4, Elan, Crestron. All those guys are continuing to advance their product and integrate the DIY products. But on the DIY side, I think there are some really decent offerings, especially Google Assistant and smart things like we saw this year towards the end of the year when they announced their new products. Google really, with their videos, there was a pig in one of them at one point. That was very strange, but they really blew me away with what they were talking about wanting their smart home to do. And that is a clear vision. Siri HomeKit, we've seen it mature a little bit more this year, and they've loosened some of the rules. I'm stealing from Jason's notes down there, but that has been encouraging. We've seen more product come to market because of that. We've seen faster return times on devices that have been promising Siri integration or HomeKit integration for years, finally come to market. So I think HomeKit is a decent and stable platform now. Of course, you have Amazon Alexa product that you can use as well, and I I mean, there's really not a terrible way that you can go, because I think on one of our shows we were talking about, and Jason said these integrations are almost like table stakes now. Like you'd buy a device, a smart home device, and you just expect it to work with Alexa, or you expect it to work with HomeKit. And that is a really, really good place for people to be in when they're going out to the Targets and Best Buys of the world and buying these things, because you're not, it's almost like you're not too much of an early adopter anymore and buying into a product that the entire platform, like Staples Connect, could be kicked out from you underneath you later on. Like if you buy a product that has both Amazon Alexa integration and Google Assistant, well, you have somewhere to go. And I think that is a great place for us as an industry to be in.
Agreed. I worry that those table stakes raise the cost of entry pretty high for anyone that wants to get into this space now. And does that potentially limit competition?
I mean, with HomeKit, you just need a phone, right? I mean, that's essentially all you need.
No. I mean, as a product manufacturer.
As a product, well, I mean, so I mean, we've seen if you want to be in the smart home and you're going to make a smart home product, you're going to have to come to the table and actually do that. And like there have been some stories this year. I think Chamberlain is now saying that they're going to charge $1 a month or some crazy amount like that for their servers and everything to integrate with Wink. And it's like,
for each integration is another $1 a month.
Why not build that into the product? I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me, but there it is. I mean, that's what they want to do. It's their company, and they are pretty much the monopoly on garage door openers here in the US. So like there are more and more coming to market. And if you want a smart device, you may end up paying $12 a year for integration. I think that's one of the more dumb stories that's come. And I'm not sure what they're thinking about that, but like there are plenty of other products out there that integrate with HomeKit, that integrate with Samsung, that integrate with Google without having to go through the same hoops as a garage door company.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at what they're doing, they're really focusing on trying to recoup costs for hosted services. There's no hosted service cost associated with working with HomeKit, for example. So they don't charge a monthly fee for that. But there is if they want to work with IFTT, and there is if they want to work with Wink and things like that. So it's weird, though. It puts out some crazy business models, that's for sure. All right. Well, if we don't have any more discussion there, let's move on to the fun part. It's time to make a prediction, one or two predictions, two at most, for what you think is going to define the smart home in 2018. And for the record, Jason, I'm reading from what I think are your instructions that say two at most. We're going to start with you, but you have three.
Busted. Yeah, I that's funny. I wrote these, we've stuck to the same template here. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, I guess. I can pick two, I think, pretty easily. I think that, there's always a temptation to pick these broad, overarching themes and see a little bit of progress towards those, and I certainly think we will. I think voice control everywhere, to me, is a big one. We started to see hints of that with like Alexa being built into Ecobee thermostats and different devices of that nature. So sort of decoupling that idea of voice control from a stationary speaker, to me, I think is a natural next step in the evolution there. I don't know just how much of that we'll see, but I think it'll be a steady progress towards seeing more of that with things like appliances and maybe wearables and things of that nature. So I think that'll be one that I'll be keeping an eye on. I think probably the other one that out of the three that I put here, the other one that I would pick is just that continued deterioration of the traditional pay TV business. I think that I don't want to kick a dead horse. I know I said a lot of this before, but I think people's viewing habits are changing. Their expectations of how they can consume content, what that content should cost, the delivery models, the user experience, all of that is really starting to really be redefined. And 2017 to me was a landmark year for that, and I think it's going to continue very prominently into 2018. So that'll be a story that I'm definitely watching, and candidly was not one that I was really keeping a close eye on coming into this past year, but really emerged again as a very significant story. So there you go, Richard. I stuck to 2. How's that?
Totally appreciate it, because I think you and I were going to actually have a little bit of overlap here anyway. So let's go ahead and go to Seth next.
I have, well, my first one's just a gimme. Siri in a can? Question mark?
Cheater.
Hey,
cheater.
You know what? You actually never know.
Did we just have we cut and paste that the last couple of years?
Can I say it every year?
That's funny.
So a real answer would be, and I'm going to steal this from Jason from last year. I think there's going to be horrible adoption and implementation of machine learning and AI this year. I think it's going to be used more as a marketing than it will be of actual implementations of machine learning or AI. And you can see that ramping up right now. Like that's starting from major companies where they're saying, oh, this is AI, and it's really not. Like it's
no, it's not. Yeah. AI was 2017's 4G.
Yeah, and now we're gonna move into AI 4G version 2 or whatever. You know, like it's just gonna be bad. I think we're gonna have a rough year trying to pull apart what these companies are doing with this information, what information they have, and what they can do with it. You know, I should have predicted last year that security would be a big story for this year. I think we talked about it a lot this year, and I think security is still going to be a big story this next year. Especially with another bullet point that I don't have on here. Am I going on 4? I don't know. But the fourth one I have is one word, Xiaomi. This is going to be a huge player. I am seeing so many things happen with that company over there in China. So Jason, it starts with an X. So get ready to start trying to say that on the show now, because it's...
Yeah, I'll go practice.
Yeah, it's...
I always end up being the one stuck trying to pronounce that name, and it just never goes well.
I'm starting to see so much come from out of that market right now, and I really think that we're going to see some interesting very low cost devices and sensors move out of China shortly. I mean, very, very low. I think I saw a $60 Z-Wave door lock that was just posted online the other day. So these things they're happening now. They've moved down from being premium price products. You know, for a door lock, you're thinking maybe $100, $200 for a smart door lock. To move it down into the $60 price point, I mean, that's huge. So be ready for a wave of Chinese, very, very cheap Chinese products coming for the smart home.
It's interesting. We don't have to riff on this or anything, but I was reading a story somebody sent me, I think from the New York Times actually, about Wyze, WYZE. And they said, I think you and I talked about them very briefly on our show. They had a camera they came out, was like $20. $20 for this camera. And actually the gist of the article was sort of how Amazon is enabling these companies to come to market and really compete with the big boys. So I think that's an interesting choice. And again, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole with that particular company, but I think the broader theme of very, very inexpensive products coming to market and leveraging distribution platforms like Amazon is obviously the big one, to get in front of people. And gosh, what does that do to the market? You know, you just assume like those super inexpensive products are cheap and not worth it, but that just isn't always going to be the case. I think economies of scale are starting to kick in, and it'll be interesting to watch that.
That $20 camera scares me. I mean, after the security problems that we had with Chinese cameras earlier this year, does that not concern anybody? I don't know. Mike, what do you think? Mike, does that concern you, Mike?
Well, yeah, Seth kind of stole my thunder on the security thing, but I think you have two conflicting things. I think the more low-priced, low-quality products you have in the market, the higher risk you have of things like the Mirai botnet. And Mirai botnet was Q4 of 2016. It seems like just yesterday, but I think we're going to see some more big botnet attacks, some more big security holes. We saw the Amazon key hack earlier, maybe a month or so ago. I think that's going to be a big story for 2018, quite honestly. So that's one of my big trends.
By the way, before we go off of that, that's terrifying, right? I mean, the potential of that is just terrifying.
Yeah, and Mirai is still a problem. It hasn't gone away at all. I think they just found a few 100,000 more nodes this last week. So it's still a huge problem and still exists.
Like, I don't know how many of you got caught up in the Y2K hype, but globally, people were concerned about accidental problems with technology. Here we're talking about incentivized maldoers, basically folks who are intentionally trying to go in and do bad. And it could be very bad.
I've got one. And this is how you can make some money and not be bad. I think that somebody's going to figure out how to use the Mirai botnet and start mining for Bitcoin. It's going to happen.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if something like that isn't already happening. We saw something where there were web pages where they were running JavaScript on the back that was actually doing some mining while you were looking at a web page. I mean, with your processor. Anyway, sorry, Mike, we kind of stole your conversation.
Take note, make money scheme next year.
Mike's exactly. Like, it's good. Keep going. I'm taking notes.
Another tech buzzword we hear a lot about is augmented reality, but I actually am getting really excited about some of the things I'm seeing in augmented reality. One of my favorite products this year was the Plot. Have you guys saw that? It's like PLOTT. It's basically replaces your basically your tape measure, and you basically can measure distance on a wall, and then you use an app to visualize what a couch looks like or whatever, and also measures the distance. I mean, this idea of like using augmented reality and mixed reality in home design is just really fascinating. A company called Modsy just got a bunch of funding to do just this thing. We know that Lowe's Labs has been experimenting with this. So I think that's going to continue to be a growing story, an interesting story in 2018.
That's very cool.
Yeah. I agree. I think there's, actually some really interesting use cases in augmented reality around tech support as well, where remote support technicians are able to use the camera on other phones to have eyes and ears on a site where they're trying to help a client work through an issue. And I think that's a really a fascinating use case as well. I think there's a lot of excitement around augmented reality, and I think for very good reason.
Nice. Have you tried the IKEA app on the iPad yet?
I was just going to mention that. I used it on my phone right when iOS 11 came out, and man, that's cool. I put a couch right in the middle of my kitchen, and I haven't used it since, so the couch could still be there. I don't know, but I thought it was pretty neat.
Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily in the demographic anymore that's buying furniture for my home in IKEA, but I imagine if I had had a tool like that when I was furnishing a new home or a new apartment or a new bedroom or something, and let's take that beyond IKEA and take it to kind of like professional designer capabilities. And what could an interior designer do, an interior decorator do with tools like that? That just kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, a professional tool. I mean, even I used to do this all the time. I used to take pictures of somebody's home with a tape measure, like on the mantle or wherever a TV is going to be. So at least I had a base reference of how big a foot would be, and then I would take that picture back to the office and mock up 50-inch, 40-inch, because clients never knew how big a TV was. I would mock up and put on the wall how big the TV was and send them pictures, and they would pick out from the 3 pictures that I sent them what size of TV they would want. And of course, the picture would have the price of the TV next to it. Something like that would be killer for in the professional space, and especially for, like you said, interior designers who are going out and trying to sell things that cost much more than TVs. and being able to take a picture of a room and accurately mock up how that's going to look for the client is huge.
Mike, at the Smart Kitchen Summit, there was a session about virtual reality and the kitchen. And that was a fascinating discussion that just went in directions that I would never have anticipated. I'm curious, do you see augmented reality in do you see specific smart home use cases? Because I can certainly see assisted cooking or assisted installations and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the beauty of augmented reality, which I actually am more excited about than virtual reality, is just this idea of like layering on information to your physical world. I mean, I've thought a lot about it in like industrial applications like warehousing. It just makes sense. You look to your right and you know where the package is. You pick it up with your forklift in an Amazon warehouse, or you're a first responder, like you know where the fire is, or if, it just makes so much sense. In the home, you can just think about using it for special needs. If you're an old person, right, and you just maybe you're disabled, you can't see well anymore. But you can just use. Maybe you can't hear. You just see how augmented reality could be used to just give information to people to just make their lives richer. And we talked about it at the Smart Kitchen Summit around food. But I just think like there's all sorts of scenarios you can envision where people would just use it to layer on information in their home that can help them. And I think home decorating is just like the sweet spot. That's just the low hanging fruit. I just think that makes so much sense.
Very cool. All right. Well, I'll round us out here on this one. And because I went out on a limb last year, really went out on a limb, I'm throwing some softballs here. The first one is that I'm predicting that connected appliances are basically going to become mainstream. We have numerous appliance companies out that are already saying by 2018 or 2019, they expect that every appliance they make is going to be connected in some way. So I think that that's a fascinating space to watch, and just trying to see that come together. I have a lot of concerns about what that looks like and how it's probably going to get very messy before it becomes useful for consumers, particularly as companies are thinking more about their own products and not about larger ecosystems. But I think that's something that we're going to see become much more popular.
Yeah, I need two integrations for my appliances. One, the dryer needs to tell me when it's done, because I never know, and it just needs to repeatedly tell me when it's done, because otherwise it's going to sit in there for 3 or 4 days before I get back to it.
Oh yeah, and the washer too, because it just sits in there and rots until I find it the next day.
Mm-hmm. And it smells great. And then the second one is I need my appliances that have clocks on them to actually be able to retain the freaking time and not go to the blinky 12 o'clock when the power has been reset. Like, I don't know why it's 2017 and appliances haven't done that yet. It seemed like VCRs solved that, and then they went away. But maybe appliances are kind of worried about the same thing. Like, I'm not going to use my oven anymore because the clock is right. Like, come on, guys, fix this.
Well, don't you know that non-volatile memory, that adds 20 cents to the cost of that chip for them. So
if that these days, I mean, memory is so cheap. Put a battery and a GPS in it, so it just like my grandmother has an atomic clock on the wall that is always set to the right time. Do that. It's in sharper image. Come on, people.
All right. Well, my final item is that, and I think you were kind of thinking along these lines with one of the things that you didn't talk about, Jason, but I think we're going to see a lot more of this kind of middle ground, do it for me services that are available to consumers. It's just commonplace now that if you buy a smart home product like a lock or something like that on Best Buy or Amazon or any number of websites, that one of the things that they're offering you is installation service.
Right.
So I honestly believe we're going to see more and more of that sort of service just become not only just a standard offering, but a pretty common service that consumers take advantage of.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think it comes from both ends too, right? It's companies like Amazon wanting to come in with those services. And it's also companies that come more from the, I guess, quote unquote, traditional smart home professional side of the business, like Seth and I do, that are adapting their business models and facing this new onslaught of consumer focused products and trying to figure out creative ways to implement those into their business models. And so I think you're seeing that continue. It's a trend that we've talked about quite a bit. We've referred to it as sort of meeting in the middle. And I agree with you. I think 2018 will be another big year for that, where we'll continue to see that services around the smart home, that DIFM, as you're calling it, or just services in general, play a more prominent role versus a true DIY. I think we're still a long ways away from a true DIY smart home for the average consumer. I don't know that we'll ever get there, frankly. I could probably figure out how to do my own plumbing or my own electrical, but I'm never likely to do that. I'm likely to hire some professional help. And I think smart home technology, no matter how easy it gets, I think there's still going to be a market for that, for the do-it-for-me crowd. And so I totally agree with you.
All right. Well, those are our predictions for next year. So we'll take a look at this about a year from now and see how we did on those. So let's go ahead and round us out here. But before we do that, I just want to thank all of you for getting together again this year. This is always so much fun. I look forward to this. When we got the email this year, the reminder that, hey, it's time to do this again, I was so excited because I had just been thinking about that, planning out my episodes. Okay, where's the Fireside chat going to fit here? So
yeah, definitely. No, it's a really fun show. I'm really glad we get to do this every year. And I know it's so cliched, but I'll say it anyways. Time does fly, and it really is amazing to me that we're doing this for a third time. And I hope we can keep it going for a long time. I always enjoy these conversations, and I think, I go back and listen to them and just think they're such valuable shows. There's just so many different perspectives, and to have, a number of different people sitting around and totally looking at the market through completely different filters and talking about what the big stories were and what the big stories are going to be moving forward, I think is really fun. I'm always honored to participate. And so I had a great time this year, as I always do.
It's been a lot of fun, guys.
It absolutely has. Let's remind people where they can hear more from us and talk about our respective shows. Let's start with you, Jason. Your social handle and the show that you do.
Yeah. So Seth and I often joke about the fact that my personal Twitter handle is probably the worst one in the world to follow. I'm terrible.
Don't follow that one.
Twitter. But the podcast is a more important one, and we do okay with that one. So at HomeTech Podcast, again, that's at HomeTech Podcast, and the show can be found online at HomeTech.fm. And we'd really appreciate anybody who tuned into this episode and hasn't checked it out. Pop on over and give us a listen. We put out a show almost every week. We're pretty consistent with that. We rarely miss an episode, and we usually push one out every Friday. So come check us out.
And your partner in crime on that is Seth. And Seth, your Twitter can get kind of feisty sometimes.
Don't follow me either. So just hang out at HomeTech Podcast. We will love that for HomeTech news. You also get we do a live show every week too. We try and tag on the live show when we can. So at HomeTech Podcast, you can follow over there. I'm pretty sure you can find Jason and I at this point on Twitter if you really wanted to follow us and see what's going on. Mine can be a mix of home technology and politics. So let's just leave it at that. It's both are very fun topics for me. So I love conversation regarding home technology and politics in any way, shape, or form.
Do they ever mix?
Well, they do, but we can't talk about it.
It's called net neutrality.
We're not having the net neutrality discussion.
No net neutrality.
All right. Well, speaking of politics and technology, Mike.
Well, I mean, I just got to say, what kind of idiot talks about politics on their Twitter feed? I mean, come on. Jeez, come on, Seth, get your act together.
So I retweet Mike a lot.
I didn't start doing it until this year. I held off. I couldn't control it. But at Michael Wolf, I actually got on Twitter early enough to get my name, and Yeah, and just smart home show you can find in the usual locations. So that's where I'm at.
All right. And also the Smart Kitchen Show.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing more regularly nowadays because it just, the business, the smart kitchen stuff's been taking off for me. So
Yeah, I've really loved to see what you've been able to do with that niche in the market. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I saw today you said you're taking that on the road and actually going overseas, right? I saw that you're heading over to Europe.
yeah, so like we wanted to do something in Europe, and I love Ireland. And if any of you guys have been there, but
Oh, yeah.
when I found out I can do this event in the Guinness Brewery, I was so excited. Like, so we're going to the Guinness Brewery. We're having it in June of next year.
Wait. That's actually where it is?
Yes, it's actually in the Guinness Brew House.
I'm looking at
Awesome.
tickets right now.
Okay, so I have been there, and hopefully you caught my team and I raising our digital hands today on Twitter. Awesome. Very excited. Cool. All right. And I host Home On. That is a podcast about DIY home automation, mostly about products, not so much about technology. And we are from the Digital Media Zone at thedigitalmediazone.com or on Twitter as DIGI Media Zone, Digimedia Zone. I'm on Twitter as Richard Gunther, and a number of other voices that you'll find all consolidated under that Richard Gunther handle. And fair warning, there's some politics there. I try not to get too caught up in it, but when it just goes so far and I can't stand it anymore, it just kind of erupts every once in a while.
If you don't want politics, stick with Jason's Twitter.
Yeah.
Of course, you won't get anything else.
Yeah. If you don't want politics, follow me where you get nothing.
All right, guys. Well, it's been great once again gathering by this fire. So let's have a quick toast and we'll get out of here. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year.
Indeed. Cheers. Thank you, guys. Yeah, this was a great time.
See ya.